Hi, this is Carlos. This is going to be the first of my what I'm calling my Sermonette series. These are just going to be brief little lessons from God's Word. Each one's going to be 5 minutes-ish, more or less, and hopefully just to pass on some little bit of truth or encouragement from God's Word. Today's is entitled, Peter Walks on the Water. Almost. This is found in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 32. I'm reading more than I need to just to give a little background on it. I don't want to read anything out of context. This is taking place directly after Jesus fed the 5,000. Okay, and then he sent the disciples on their way, the apostles on their way. I'm going to start reading in verse 22 of chapter 14 of Matthew. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw he was walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Okay, now it says here in verse 29, Peter got out of the boat, and he actually started walking on water. But in verse 30 it says, "But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, 'Lord, save me.'" When he saw the turmoil going on around him, he took his eyes off of Jesus and began to sink. He allowed the things going on around him to cause him to lose focus on the one who was keeping him afloat. Are we doing this in our lives? Have you ever seen any of those cartoons where one of the characters goes walking off a cliff and he's floating on air because he doesn't realize he's walked off a cliff? And suddenly when he looks around and sees the trouble around him, he falls. When we allow ourselves to focus too closely on the troubles around us, we start to think, "Hey, I can't do this," or "It's too much for me." And many times we're right. It is too much for us. We shouldn't be able to deal with whatever it is. Just like Peter should not have been able to walk on the water. Yet when his eyes were on Jesus, he was able to do something he could not otherwise do. Sometimes we are faced with some legitimately big problems, so we need to remember that those are the times we really need to focus on Christ, realizing he is the one who will keep us above water. In verses 31 and 32, it says, "Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. 'You of little faith,' he said, 'why did you doubt?' And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down." When Jesus chose to stop the problem, it stopped. Have faith. Trust in God. He will bring us through whatever storms there may be in our lives because he has the power over the wind and the waves. Hold on tight to God. He will bring us through whatever the problem may be. God bless you.